So welcome everybody to our webinar tonight on how the reading pen helps those with dyslexia. This webinar is going to be run by our guest speaker tonight, David Campbell from Scanning Pens, and he will introduce himself shortly. First of all, I'd just like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we're all meeting here tonight and pay my respects to both elders, past, present and emerging. If you could all just put in the chat box or unmute yourselves and just let us know where you're from tonight and why you've joined us.
Do you want me to go first?
That'd be great.
Okay, Maureen, I did attend the last webinar. I am an educational consultant, special ed teacher, working one-on-one with children with learning difficulties. And I have actually used the C-Pen Reader with 3 of my students, and 2 of them now in year 10 use them, and one of my primary school students also uses them. But I would actually like to find out other people's experiences of them and how far they can actually be extended into their learning. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Vicky, did you want to introduce yourself?
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Shay. So I'm Vicky. I work in a Catholic primary school out in the eastern area. And yes, I am here with a few of my staff members to find out more about this pen and see how that can help some of our children at school with dyslexia. Thanks, Shay.
Thank you, Vicky. Liz, would you like to introduce yourself now you're not the co-host?
Yeah, I'm Liz. I'm the Learning Diversity and Wellbeing Leader out at Vicky's school, and I've been campaigning for a little while, trying to get some pens together to be able to assist the kids. But I think it's going to be great tonight to be able to get a bit more information about it. And I also have 2 dyslexic children as well.
Thanks, Liz, for sharing that, and welcome.
Thank you.
And we've got Rebecca.
And I'm Beck, and I work with Vicky and Liz, and I'm actually a prep teacher, classroom teacher. And so I don't really know much about the pen, but I'm really interested in learning about what it has to offer in the classroom.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. I'll just quickly share a little bit about myself for those who don't know me. I originally trained as a speech pathologist and have gone on to do my Master's in Public Health and Health Administration. And I'm now doing my doctorate in public health, looking at the social and emotional wellbeing of young people and adults with dyslexia and their workplace experiences. I've spent the last 15 years in the not-for-profit and healthcare sector and recently moved in social entrepreneur space. And I was diagnosed with dyslexia and dysgraphia at the age of 27 when I was undertaking my Master's. And since then, I've been on a journey that enabled me to establish the foundation in 2015, where we work to support young people and adults that have dyslexia and other learning disabilities or specific learning difficulties. And we do that through assessment and support services, advocacy and awareness raising, research, and what we're here to do tonight is training. So I won't talk any further, and I'll hand over to David, who will just quickly introduce himself, and then we can get learning.
Great. Okay. I've just turned everything on. I just was getting myself all organised behind the scenes. So hello, everybody. It's great to have you here. And it's a small group, so we can actually, we can play it a bit by ear, and we can go through and you can ask questions as we go. And I'm more than happy to tailor this to suit you. It sounds as if most of you are primary school. Is that correct? Have I got it sort of right there? So we can tailor things more towards the primary school. But a little about me. I've been involved in education for quite a while. I worked, my first foray into education actually was when I was with Encyclopedia Britannica. Remember then? Way back in the dim dark years. And after the books had gone, we set up Britannica School and Britannica Online. From there, I moved into online platforms, firstly student management systems or student information systems, and then learning management systems with American companies. And then I was tapped on the shoulder by the guys from Scanning Pens saying that they were going to set up in Australia and would I like to basically join them. And I said, great, fantastic. How many staff? And they went, you're it. So I now have a huge staff of 5, but when I started, it was just me. And we've only been going a couple of years here in Australia. So I will talk to you a little about Scanning Pens itself, but I just wanted to introduce myself. I am in my daughter's bedroom because my wife said that I was too noisy in those other rooms, so I've locked myself away here at the moment. So anyway, we'll see how we go. So Shay, are you okay for me just to rock on, or do you want to say anything?
No, it's the show. The floor is yours.
Okay, all right, excellent. Well, hopefully I've got a camera here. We've got a new camera, and my staff can work it really well, and I'm useless at it, so there might be a bit of clunking backwards and forwards. But what I'm going to do is firstly just give you a bit of a background of the company, and then I'm going to actually go into a bit of a hands-on demonstration with the pen and what it can do. And talk to you about the various C-Pen products, because there's a bit of confusion. I'm just going to sort of change my view here because all I can see is Shay, and while she's very good,
aren't you lucky?
I'm going to go into full screen hopefully, and I don't know why I can't. I guess I don't know. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Now I can see everybody, which is great. So let me just tell you a little bit about C-Pens and a little bit about Scanning Pens, because a lot of people get confused with the name, and also ReaderPen and Exam Pen and all of that sort of thing. So just a bit of background. The company that I work for and that I'm Australian manager of is Scanning Pens. And Scanning Pens is a British company. It was actually founded by someone that Shay's already had dealings with and had a bit of a podcast with him, but Jack Churchill, who is the great-grandson of Sir Winston Churchill. And so some Winston Churchill money was put into the founding of the company. And Jack and Sir Winston were both dyslexic, and Jack was looking around for products for assistive technology that could assist him. He was at university. He was very frustrated at the lack of products that were around to help someone that's dyslexic read. And so he went searching, and he found a company called C-Pen. So when you see the products, let me just hold one up to you. I'll just hold the ReaderPen up if I can find it. Here it is here. So this is the ReaderPen. And as you can see, the big name at the top is C-Pen. So C-Pen is the company. And C-Pen is actually a Swedish company. And Scanning Pens entered into an arrangement with them. So we are the worldwide global exclusive distributor of C-Pen. Now, that said, there are actually a number of C-Pen products. This is the ReaderPen. That's the one we're going to be talking about tonight, which is our main product. But we also have the, I won't get to show you that one. I'll show you this one now. This is the Exam Reader. Yeah, thank you, Siri. This is the Exam Reader, which I'm more than happy to talk to you about. And you can see the banner behind me for both the ReaderPen and the Exam Reader. This is a new product out, which has only been out for about a month, called the Lingo Pen, which is also a C-Pen. And we have another C-Pen product called the Connect. So there are a number of C-Pens around, but most people call the ReaderPen the C-Pen, and that's fine with us. And the number one C-Pen product, if you like, is the ReaderPen. So basically what has happened is that Scanning Pens has been running for over 10 years in the UK, and they've been doing very, very well. And then a couple of years ago, they decided that they would set up a number of offices. So they set up in the USA, Canada. We now have an office in India as well. And then decided to set up in Australia. So we set up in Australia in 2018. Incidentally, with this COVID-19 stuff, the office that is really running as per normal is Australia. In the UK, all of the staff have been furloughed, which is what they're doing over there. A large number of staff have been, in the US, have been stood down. In Canada, they've also been stood down. So we're sort of running as per normal at the moment with the rest of, it's a skeleton staff. So it's quite interesting to see the comparison between the various offices. So let me talk about the various pens, and then I'm going to show you some of the bits and pieces. Have you all got pens with you, or some of you haven't got pens at all? Okay, so you really want to know what they can do. Okay, fine. So the purpose really of the C-Pens is to assist people that have reading issues, reading difficulties. Now we know, it's a fact, that 10% of the world population is dyslexic. And that's a figure which is pretty well established by organizations all around the world. So it follows that 10% of your students in your school are also dyslexic. Now, some of those students have been diagnosed. So that makes it nice and easy. You know that Johnny over there has dyslexia, so he has a reading issue. But Sue over there hasn't been diagnosed. She still is behind where she should be. She has major problems reading. Is she dyslexic? Is she not? And you know, you might not know. And of course, then besides dyslexia and dysgraphia, Shay can talk more expertly on this because she's an expert. We have other reading issues and reading problems. And of course, then we've also got people whose first language is not English. So in virtually every school, it's estimated that at least 20% of students have a reading issue or a reading problem of some kind. And it's a nightmare for you teachers to be able to work through that, because you also know that if someone's dyslexic and you're getting them to read, then their hand is up every 2 minutes because there's a word here and a word there that is problematic. And it's, and that, you know, that is taking up a lot of your time, and you're not necessarily able to devote your resources to the rest of the class as best you can. So the ReaderPen, and this is it here, it's a very small device. The ReaderPen, which is about the size of a highlighter, has been developed to convert text to speech and read the words out to the user. And what that does is that it enables that person to read independently. So these pens are used in schools and universities and colleges and libraries and hospitals all around the world and all around Australia. I would like to think that most teachers at least know about them. That I was speaking to a school today in Queensland who ordered 6 of them and said, we have just found out about the reading pen and we did not know that it existed. And I said, well, how long have you been the head of learning support? She said, 10 years. So we're gradually trying to get our message out. And, you know, it's a challenge for us to do so. But what the ReaderPen does is that it uses a thing called OCR, which stands for Optical Character Recognition, to convert text to speech. And I'm going to hold this up to the camera. Not that you'll see it, but there's a big gaping hole in there, and at the end of that hole there's a lens, there's a camera inside this pen, and what it does, it actually photographs the text and then it converts that text into speech. And there's 3 ways that you can hear the pen. Most people just plug in a set of headphones, so at the other end there's a plug, a normal headphone plug. You can just plug the headphones into it, so which means you can use this pen in class without disturbing other students. There is a speaker in the pen itself, and you can actually hold it up to your ear just like that, and you'll hear it. It's not designed for basically a large number of people because the volume is not that loud. Or the third way to hear it is you can plug in an external speaker. And I've got my speaker here, which I listen to my music on, and I'm just going to plug my pen into that, and we're going to be able to hear it pretty clearly as far as that's concerned. So far so good. Has anybody got any questions so far, or are we happy for me just to continue on with a real demonstration of how it works? Okay, great. So what I've got is I've got my camera here, and I'm going to see if it works. So this is my camera, as you can see. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully that will work. And then hopefully my camera will come up as one of the options, which is, we were playing around with it before, and it was great that it was doing that. So let's just see if we can get that to do that one more time. This might just take a few seconds for me just to get everything organized. And just, what can you see at the moment, Jay? Can you just see me playing around with all this stuff on the screen?
I can just see your face at the moment.
Oh, is that right? Okay, so we haven't even, I'm waiting for my camera to come up. And
While you're doing that, we'll just welcome Claire, who's just joined us, and Kathy. Or has Kathy dropped out? I can't see many people now.
ooh,
Kathy's there,
Here's
Shay.
Kathy. Here's Kathy. Welcome to you both. Thanks for joining tonight.
okay, just bear with me. There we go. Now, if I'm just going to click on that, and then I'm going to share. Now, can you see my keyboard? Is
Yes.
fantastic. Okay, well, this is good. You'll be pleased to know, everybody, this is the first time I've successfully got this camera working, which is great news for me. It's one of the great things in my life. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put some paper down here and get the camera down here. And I'm going to, hopefully, this camera will go into focus and you'll be able to see it. But before we do that, I just want to show you something, which is here. So can you guys all see this all right?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So what this is it's called the menu guide. This is from a user guide that we do, and if anybody uses the pen, and can I just say right now, with regards to the teachers and everybody that are here, that we offer free trials of the pen. So for you, if you think the pen has got potential, I would suggest you don't race out and buy a whole lot. You just contact me, and my email is really easy, and I suggest you write this down, but I will give it to you again. But it's just david@scanningpens.com. And what I would suggest you do is contact me. We will send you some pens for a trial. I know you've got holidays coming up, so we'll give you an extended trial over the holiday period and beyond, so that you can actually evaluate the pens for yourself. And then at the end of that trial period, you simply return the pens to us. There's absolutely no cost. If you wish to buy them at that point, well, you can do so, but there's no obligation and there's no cost. The only cost for you is the return postage. So I would suggest that you take advantage of the trial, and then you can use them for yourself and evaluate them and see if it's got merit. But what I want to show you first is the menu guide, because there are a number of, and I'm just going to just get this light, I don't know if that's better or worse, probably worse, so that you can see it nice and clearly. But the pen itself, even though it looks pretty innocuous and pretty easy to use, and it is, there's only a couple of controls on the pen, but there's a ton of processing power on this pen, and it can do a whole heap of different things. Now, I've mentioned to you that its main function is to convert text to speech and read those words out to the user. So that is what we call the text reader. And the text reader is this very first thing here. There are 5 main components to the pen. So there's the text reader, dictionary, scan to file, recorder, and settings. And I'll talk briefly about those. I won't go into a huge amount of detail, but the text reader is the thing that you'll use it on most of the time, and that does the conversion of text to speech. But behind the scenes, and you can see, and I won't expect you to be able to see all these, but there's lots of settings. And the settings enable you to do a lot of things, where you can speed the pen up, you can slow it down. In other words, you can tailor the pen to suit the requirements of the student that you're working with. Because if you've got someone that is dyslexic. You might have someone that's just mildly dyslexic, and so therefore it's you know, only a few words here and there, and they're pretty, you know, capable of being able to hear those at normal speed. But if someone has got a whole host of different issues and is severely dyslexic, then the normal playback speed of the pen could be too fast. So you can slow it down quite dramatically. You can also change the accent. There are 6 accents on the pen. When I started the company here in Australia, we just had British English and American English. I got them over in Sweden to add Australian English. So that is now on the pen. There's also Irish English, Scottish English, and Indian English. So you can change the accent every day if you wish. There's also other settings where you can left hand and right hand settings. I had a call from one school in WA last year where they said, look, we've got the pen, it's fantastic, but we've now got a student that's left-handed, so we'd like to order a left-handed pen. And I said, you do not have to worry about that. It's just a setting on the pen which changes it, because if I'm using the pen, I'm right-handed, I would naturally scan from left to right, and I would hold it in this hand so I can see the screen. If someone's left-handed, well, automatically the screen's upside down, and they would naturally scan from right to left. But you can scan in either direction, and I'll talk about that a little later as well. But the text reader mode is what you'll use it in mainly, and it's pretty easy to change all the settings, and I'll be able to show you that. The next point down is the dictionary function. There are actually 5 dictionaries built into this pen. And the reason is, you'll say, well, why 5? Now, let me tell you that this particular pen, and I showed you a whole bunch of pens before, this particular pen will read English, it'll read French, and it'll read Spanish. So there's a Spanish dictionary in there, there's a French dictionary, and there's 3 English dictionaries. And the question you'll say is, why do you have 3? And the reason for that is because the dictionary that was on there initially was the Collins English Dictionary, which is a great dictionary, but it's very comprehensive. And it goes, and the dictionary will read you the definition, and I'll show you that in a few moments' time. But the Collins English Dictionary was just hugely comprehensive and goes on and on and on, and it's just too detailed, especially for primary school students. So we added a second dictionary, which was the Oxford Primary Dictionary. And you can select which dictionary you want. We suggest you keep it on Oxford Primary Dictionary because it's much more concise. Even for grown-ups, really, the Oxford Primary Dictionary is all you need because it's very concise, it's short and sweet, so it's not too complicated. The third English dictionary is a North American dictionary. So it's got all of the S's as Z's, and it's got all of the weird American spelling in there. So you won't ever have it on the North American dictionary, but it's on the pen as well. The third feature down here is scan to file. Now, scan to file just means data storage. On the pen itself, there's 3 gigabytes of storage, which is a lot. I understand 1 gigabyte, you can store 250,000 pages. So there's 3 gigabytes, so that's 750,000 pages you can store on this pen if you wish to do so. So that means that if in text reader mode, this very first one that we talked about, text reader mode is great, but it doesn't save. So every time you turn the pen off, then you'll lose whatever text is there. If you wanted to save text and go back to it and read it out again, and maybe it's an important thing that you want to hear, you can just put it into the memory, and then you can hear that as many times as you want. Another feature within the scan to file function is the ability just to connect to a laptop or PC, and you can instantly transfer, you can scan text and transfer it directly into a Word document or into any other, Google Docs or OneDrive, whatever you want. So for a student that's studying and wants to just make notes, you can scan, it's a data capture capability, which is built into the pen. The fourth function down here is recorder. That is a voice recorder, so it's just like a dictaphone. And in a classroom setting, that's great because it enables the student to do a number of things. Firstly, they can simply record a lecture or a teacher giving instructions. Or thirdly, a teacher might say to a student, look, you know, Johnny, I want you to go and I want you to read chapter 1 and then use the voice recorder to give me some verbal feedback. What did you think about it? Or what, you know, what did Captain Smith think he was doing, etc. So that's another function. You might not use that very often, but it's there as well. And then the final piece down here is settings. And that enables you, as I say, to change the accents. As I said, there's 6 accents on the pen. There's a talking menu, which is great for someone that's visually impaired. You can have that on so that, because on the screen, and I'll show you that, I'll turn the pen on now, so you'll be able to see it for yourself. The menu items that come up on the screen are relatively small, but if you're visually impaired, the talking menu will enable you to hear as well as see. So as you can see here, we've got the text reader, dictionary, and if I just use the navigation button, so we have basically navigation here like your TV remote control, up, down, left, right, and OK in the middle. So if I scan down, it goes text reader, dictionary, scan to file, voice recorder, and settings. So that is the 5 settings on the pen. Now, while I've got this page open, I'll also show you the difference between the exam reader and the ReaderPen, because a lot of people ask, what's the difference? Now, obviously, if a pen has got data storage and voice storage on it, that means that a student taking that pen into an exam could potentially cheat. Also, if there's a dictionary on there, most exams don't allow a dictionary. So the ReaderPen would enable someone, if they had it preloaded with the answers, to cheat. The exam reader, as you can see, just has 2 functions, the text reader and settings. So we have basically eliminated the data storage, the voice storage, and the dictionary function on that pen. Now, and I know we've got primary kids here, so I suggest you don't even need the exam reader. The exam reader really is for Year 12 students that perhaps have been using the ReaderPen during their school career. They're going into VCE, and the VCAR, the Victorian Curriculum and Assessment Authority, have approved the exam reader to be used in exams under special conditions. Now, when I say approved, you have to apply under special provisions to use the pen, and they will consider each application on a case-by-case basis. So I can't guarantee that they'll approve it, but every exam board in Australia has evaluated the pen, and they've all approved it on a case-by-case basis under special provisions, except for South Australia, which has basically said, look, the exam reader gives the student no advantage except hearing the exam questions, so any student can use the exam reader at the discretion of the principal. So that's if you live in Adelaide, good on you. But if you live in Melbourne, you have to apply to VCAR under special provisions, only in Year 12. I should also point out here that one of the many settings, and I said I wouldn't go into all of the settings on the pen, but one of the many settings on the ReaderPen is exam mode. So you can convert the ReaderPen into the exam reader. You can deactivate the dictionary and the storage, or you can just deactivate the storage and leave the dictionary. You have that flexibility simply by entering a code into the pen. So that's one of the many settings. So if you ask me the question, which pen is better value, both are priced the same, I would really recommend the ReaderPen because you get much more functionality in the pen itself. So let's, without further ado, show you how it works. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to find some paper, because I've got on my screen, if I scan here, I'm going to have a bumpy surface, which we don't want. But anyway, so what I've got here is I've just got some famous quotes, which I like. And what I'm going to do is get my ReaderPen, which is here, which is still going. And I'm going to plug in to the back end of it that external speaker that I told you about. So I'm just going to plug that in there, turn the speaker on. 90%. Very good. And I'm just going to go up here to text reader, and I'm going to just push the OK button. The screen has now gone blank. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to get a line here. When you touch it down on the paper, a light comes on. Now the reason for that is because, remember I mentioned there's a camera in the end of it? So that enables the camera to see the text. So when the light comes on, that's great. And you just scan the line that you want.
Early to bed and early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise.
Okay, there you go. That is set to the Australian accent. I can show you other accents, or I can play you other accents if you want. So we've just scanned that line. It's come out pretty, hopefully you can see that. Can you see that, Shay? Is it pretty clear? Yep. Yeah, good. Okay, I'll take that as a yes.
Yeah.
If you want to hear it again, you just use the control buttons to just use the digital highlighter to go where you want to. And if you want to hear it again, you just go up here to the top and just go, yes.
Early to bed and early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise.
So let's say there's a word you're not so sure about. You're not sure of the word wealthy. So you can just hold the button down.
Wealthy.
And what it does, it repeats it again, and it comes up in a nice large font. So, you know.
And
you can do that as much as you want or whatever.
Wise.
So let's say you've scanned this line, but you're still not sure about the word wealthy, and you want to hear the definition. So all you do is, and hopefully I've set it to the, remember I said Oxford Primary Dictionary, but anyway, we'll see. I forgot what I've set this to. But hopefully it's Oxford Primary Dictionary. So I just push the menu button. It now has given me what's called a submenu here. I'm just going to go into the definition and I'll press OK. I'd like the definition of this word. Now it's given me the definition, which is here on the screen. Now I can scroll down and I can read the definition if I want. But what I would rather do is just press the button.
Wealthy. Wealthy adjective. Wealthier, wealthiest. Someone is wealthy when they have a lot of money or property.
Okay, that is the Oxford Concise Dictionary. If it was the Collins one, it would still be going, giving me all of the various definitions of wealthy. The downside of the Oxford Primary Dictionary is because it's concise and short, there are some words that are not in there, particularly if it's a complicated word. But that's okay, because if you go, okay, that's fine. What I'm going to do is I'm going to choose the dictionary that I want. So it says here, select dictionary. So I'm going to press OK. And as you can see here, it says OPD. That stands for Oxford Primary Dictionary. Now, if I just use the navigation button, that's the Spanish dictionary. That's the French dictionary. So I'm now back to the English dictionary. And if I just press the navigation button, NOAD stands for the North American Dictionary. And if I push one more, there's the Collins dictionaries. There's the 3 English dictionaries, plus the other 2. So I'm going to put it back onto OPD, Oxford Primary Dictionary, press OK. And that's all good. So now I just press the back button. Now I'm back to where I was at the start. So let me do another line. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clear that screen, start again. Here we go. And we'll just scan this line here.
I'm here, Romeo. Wherefore art thou, Romeo?
Now, just to let you know, the pen will read any standard font. So these fonts on this sheet of paper are all different fonts in actual fact, but they're standard fonts. So these are fonts that you would expect to see in a textbook or a novel or newspaper magazine. What it won't read is that it won't read fancy fonts or super condensed fonts. It won't read handwriting, and it won't read a computer screen. And the reason it won't read a computer screen is simply because of the reflection that you get back in. So again, if I was to scan this line here, you just go here.
You can fool some of the people all of the time, and all of the people some of
the time.
the time.
So you don't have to necessarily scan slowly. You can actually scan quite fast, you know.
Time is money.
Or you can scan really slow if you want to. It doesn't really make too much difference. Fast is probably better.
We shall fight on the beaches. We shall. I never surrender.
Now, it's not necessarily accurate 100% of the time because the shall came up as, this is what it came up as here, Charlie. But if you just scan again.
Shall.
There you go. So we shall never surrender. So that's just the basic scanning functionality of the pen and showing you the dictionary function. A lot of teachers initially at the start, you know, when you're at a conference or whatever and you show them the pen and you go, oh, this is great. And I go, oh yeah, that's good. But you know, how much can you scan? Well, as I've mentioned, the memory in the pen is huge. But the way that is set up for auto read is every time you scan and then lift the pen.
To be or not to be, that is the question.
Every time you lift the pen, it starts to read. So teachers have said, look, that's great, but that means that you can only do a line at a time. So one of the other features of the pen is auto read. So you can turn that auto read off, which means you could then scan a whole couple of lines or a whole paragraph or a whole page. And then when you are ready, you just guide the digital highlighter to where you want it to start. And then you just get it to start at that point.
Not to be, that is the question, never surrender.
So you've got a lot of different features and functionality with regards to being able to get the pen to read or whatever. Most kids, as I say, will just keep it on the text reader mode, excuse me, and they may not even go into the dictionary mode. I had, just going to have a little sip of water here. The pressure is intense. I had one school ring me up, it was about a year ago now, it just seems yesterday, but it was probably about a year ago. And this school had a pen and they said, look, we would like to order a class set. So we sell these individually or in sets of 10 or whatever. And I said, that's great. So what, you're going to put one in each class? And she said, no. She said, look, she was dealing with a group of kids that needed the pen. And, you know, one of the kids was getting a lot of benefit from it when they were using it privately, but they felt self-conscious about using it in a classroom environment. So she wanted to turn up with half a dozen pens and to say to the class, look, what we've got today, we've got the ReaderPen, who would like to use one? And of course, everybody puts their hands up and you then circulate these pens around, and even kids that don't need them play with them. So in other words, you take the stigma out of it, and then it becomes a bit of a cool thing to use. So she wanted to really have multiple pens to be able to use in a classroom environment, which was absolutely fantastic. That said, you can have a couple of students that you think would benefit from the pen, and you give them the pen to use. One student comes back and says, this is amazing. I haven't been wanting to read. Now I can read. It's opened my eyes. It's really changed things. And you're very pleased about that. The other student says, no, I didn't like it. I couldn't get it to work. It wasn't reliable. I'm not interested. And that's just the way of the world. And that's just means that you have to then go into plan B or plan C or plan D. So not every student will necessarily warm to it, but the whole point of the pen is to enable a student to read independently, and particularly if I've got it at home, and of course most schools don't allow students to take them home, so very often students will use them at school, but then the parents will ring us and say, look, my son or daughter is using the pen at school, can I buy one because I want them to have it at home for their homework and to read independently. So you'll find that students that are dyslexic, and Shay can possibly talk about this, and if you've experience with that, it's not every word on every line that's a problem. It's a word here, it's a word there, it's a couple of words that become a bit of a roadblock. Would you say that's right, Shay?
Yes, that is right. Yeah.
So therefore, you're not, with a ReaderPen, you're not necessarily having to read the whole novel. You know, it could just be, you know, as I say, a word
I
here,
discontent.
or a couple of words here and there, you know.
Vain shall meet.
So when you see that, when that word comes up, that's a problem, then you scan, you go, okay, that's what it means. If you need to use the dictionary, go ahead, use the dictionary. But then it enables you to then move on through. So progressively, you know, you may only be using the pen for, I don't know, half a dozen words on a page or in a paragraph. It's not every single word on every single line that's the problem.
Yeah,
You could read a whole, sorry, Shay.
I was going to say it would be useful when you've, sometimes when the words move on the page or you've misread something, to have the pen to just scan back over that sentence where it's been jumbled for you.
That's right. And the other thing too, and again, I can't speak from about dyslexia as well as Shay can, but the other thing too that I'm told is that for someone that's dyslexic, reading is a really taxing and tiring thing to do. So the more tired you are, the more mistakes you make, or the more words that become problematic. So if someone is tired, then they'll use the ReaderPen more often. If someone's not so tired, then you're okay, and you can probably work your way through it. So the use of the pen varies greatly from person to person, time of the day, and a whole host of other factors that come into play with that. Let me just show you just a couple of other things with the pen. I'm just going to put it on here. There's the battery, just to let you know, you charge the pen. The battery only takes an hour or so to charge, and when it's charged, it lasts for about 8 or 9 hours of continual use. So it'll easily get you through the day. That's if it's used continually. As I said, you'll only use it for a word here and a word there. There's an auto shut off function. I haven't charged this pen for about 2 weeks. So let's just have a look at the battery life on it. So there's a little icon up here on the top right, which says it's about half full. But what I can do is I can go into settings, and I can just go down to systems information here, press that, state of charge, and it's telling me it is 50%. So you can actually get an exact readout. Now, a couple of other things. So the controls on the pen, up, down, left, right, this button here is fantastic. It's the back button. It'll just, whatever happens, it'll always take you back to these 5 things. Remember? Text reader, dictionary, data storage, voice recorder, and settings. So I'm going to go, I just want to show you the left and right hand settings. So I'm going to go into here. Menu language. Remember I mentioned that the pen can read English, French, and Spanish. So this just lets you set the language that you want the menu to be in. Obviously, we'll leave it in English. Talking menu, I'll show you how that works. I'm going to turn that on. On. So now it's going to drive you crazy because it's going to talk.
Talking menu.
Yeah.
TTS settings. Exam lock.
So
Press OK to select, or up or down for more options.
So I'm just going to
TTS settings. Talking menu. Reading on.
Off. There we go. I've turned her off now. So the talking menu, great for people that are visually impaired. It's another feature that you probably won't use, but it is there on the pen. TTS settings is text to speech settings. So we'll go into here, English voice. So I've got that set on Australian English. There's Irish English, Scottish, Indian, American, and British. I like British. I'll leave it on British. And you can have a little listen and see what the difference is. If I just then go back into text reader. So now we've gone from Australian. We're now going to hear it in British, proper English.
Early to bed and early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise.
So there you go. Now, incidentally, all our voices, and we are changing it, all our voices are female. And that's because females are always right, and so therefore no one can argue with them. But some speech pathologists have said, look, a male voice as an option would be good, because some kids react better to female voices, some kids react better to male voices. So we are going to be adding male voices, but at the moment all our voices are female. So I'm now going to go back to settings that I was showing you before. Talking menu, TTS, English voice. There's also, as I've indicated, Spanish and French voices on there as well. We'll just leave it on English, which is the way to go. And I'm going to bail out of that. Exam lock, as I mentioned, this is where you can deactivate the storage and deactivate the dictionary and convert this pen into an exam pen. So for school exams that are not controlled by VCAL, which is only year 11 and 12, I think, So any internal schools exams, you can use this pen in an exam environment very, very easily. Left-handed and right-handed, did I show you that? I'm not sure. I've talked about it, I know. So let me just show you what happens. So I'm going to push that. So it is set now on right-handed. Look what happens to the screen when I put it up to left-handed. So the screen has automatically switched over, which means I can hold it in my left hand. And now I can scan. I can scan right to left, but then we have found that some students say, well, look, that's great. Yes, I can scan right to left, but I would prefer to scan in the direction of the words, left to right. Now, with this pen, you can scan in either direction. It figures out what you're trying to do. So you can scan left to right or right to left. It'll still read the words in the proper order. So I'm going to just put that back to right-handed so I can use it. There we go. Brightness is just the brightness on the screen. Date and time you can set. Auto shutdown, at the moment it's set on 10 minutes, but you can, this is just to save the battery. So that's just another feature. Systems information will tell you the state of the charge. Storage space on the pen, I have 2.2 gigs of storage on this pen. So with that, why don't I just pause a little because it's about quarter two, and then open up for any questions that anybody's got. I'm happy to show you any other features on the pen. I can show you how to slow it down and all that sort of thing as well. But perhaps at this point, I'll just take a bit of a pause and ask if anyone's got any questions or anything that they need me to clarify or go over at this stage.
May I ask 2 questions?
No, only one. No, of course you can. Sorry, yes.
I seem to remember that it can be updated if you've already got a pen. For example, if the male voice is going to be added, can I then update my C-Pen reader?
And the answer to that is yes. Yep, we update. In fact, one of the functions, let me just show you here, on settings, if I go down to systems information, and there's software upgrade. So if there is an upgrade, you can upgrade. I should point out though, that it is not a super user-friendly upgrade. So what I advise schools to do is just flick it to their IT guys and they'll do it for you.
Okay.
If you don't have an IT guy, it still can be done and we can give you directions, but it's not one of those ones where you plug it in and it says off. So it's not like your iPhone where it just upgrades overnight for you magically. There's a few things that you need to do, but the answer is yes, and software upgrades are included. There's no cost obviously for those.
Right. And my second question,
Yes.
Can you download, or does it have the Dyslexia Font?
And the answer is no to both of those. It doesn't have the font. It does read. I was at the VALA, Victorian Library Association conference earlier this year, and we were playing around with the dyslexic font. It reads it, which is great, but it doesn't. You can't download it, but it does. And there's a couple of dyslexic fonts. There's a modern one and an older one, I understand. You know? It was reading the modern one very easily.
Oh, good. Good. Thank you.
My pleasure.
David, if more than one child is using it at different times, how easy is it for them to find, like if they've stored something they've scanned, how easy is it to find if they're not the most previous, like if they're not the most recent user of the pen? Yeah,
so the storage on the pen is not super easy. What I'm saying here is that it would be great if you could just name a file and just say this is Kathy Dunn's file so that you could go back to it. What it does is that it gives it a number and you have to remember that number. So when you go on to, so let me just show you if you're looking here. So I'm just going to go down to scan to file. And as you can see there, it says, I don't know if you can see this, it says continue 180421. So that is something that we've stored on this pen previously. So to create a new one, you just go down to new file and then you scan and then you just save it and it's on there, but it'll give it another number. So you need to remember that number to go back to it. But there could be, you know, many different file numbers. You just have to remember which one's yours.
Okay, David, I've got one. It's really basic.
No, you go for your life.
Really basic, because I missed that little bit when you plugged the cord into the scanning pen.
Yep.
Can a child use it without that cord?
Yeah, let me show you.
That's just for the, why did you plug that cord in? Sorry, I missed it.
No, just so that because the speaker, the volume. So there's 3 ways to hear. Most kids will. So when let me just show you. So when you get the, actually it might not even be in here. So because I just pulled these out of my cupboard to show you the boxes, but I'm just going to go into here. Oh yes, fair enough. So when you get the pen, oh, those have been used. So there's a set of headphones that come with every pen. So most kids in a classroom situation will use headphones. That said, there is a speaker on the pen, and I'm going to show you. So I'm using this around my neck, so I just need to know where the microphone is. So let me just go back to, well, I won't have anything scanned, so I'll go back to the text reader, and I'll scan something on here, and then
always forgive your enemies. Nothing annoys them so much.
now you probably didn't hear that very much.
Yep.
Did you hear it at all?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a speaker just here on the pen. So if a student is using headphones, that's fine. If they don't have headphones, or you want to let other people hear it, you just hold that up to your ear, and you can hear it, but it's not very loud. The reason I plugged in the external speaker was because you can easily hear it, because I'm just blasting you out. So whenever I go to a conference, I just take the external speaker and I just use that, and it's great.
Sorry, yeah, that's what I missed at the beginning. I didn't realise you were using an external speaker. That's what it was.
Yeah, I am. I'm using this speaker here, which is a Bose speaker. It's super loud, and it's just great for being able to let people hear it. But most students will just use earphones. It comes with earphones. We suggest, and you can buy other earphones, but it's a standard plug, so any earphones will work. Not Bluetooth, unfortunately, so you just plug them in. And most kids will have their own, and for health and safety reasons, you let them use their own, or maybe you've got a couple of spare pairs. You know?
Okay, yeah. So you just answered my question about Bluetooth as well.
Yes, it doesn't have Bluetooth, unfortunately. So the new Bluetooth headphones won't work with this. You need the standard plugged-in ones. But that said, you can buy them for like $1 or $2 on eBay or Amazon if you want. And we have them if you wanted to buy them from us. But, you know, ours are more expensive. I think ours are $2 or something. But anyway, you can buy them in little sets. I'm just trying to, here we go. Here's a pen which I know is new because I've just opened it. So this is how they come, all wrapped up in here. And when you open this up here, what you get in the box is the charging cable. There is your set of headphones that come with it. And there's a carry case, which is reinforced at the bottom, because remember I said that's where the camera is. So you can pop that in there. And then if you, some schools, as I mentioned before, some schools buy class sets. So a class set, I'm just going to show you here, so there's a class set, and that comes, we provide the number of boxes, but it also has got a hard attaché case where you can put all 10 pens in there. And that's the price of 10 pens. That's $3,000.
David, can I just ask, up to what sort of size font is it able to actually read?
Yep, great question. So, yeah, let me tell you about some of the limitations. So here's the camera here in the end. So the font has to fit in this little band here. So that the smallest size is 6.3 through to 22, 24 point. I was at a school showing them the pen. It was reading really well, and we were just pulling books off the library shelf, and it was one of these kids' fairy tale books, and it had a big first letter. You know, once upon a time was a big O and then a small NCE, and it wouldn't read the O because it didn't fit in, so it just read the NCE. So it's a little frustrating if it's bigger than 22 point. Other limitations, just to let you know, because it won't read a computer screen, laminated paper. If the paper, if it's laminated, if it's too shiny, it will struggle. It will read coloured, type on coloured paper. So, obviously black on white is its favourite. So any, dark font on a light paper, if it's dark blue on a yellow paper, it'll read that. But if you had like a light orange on a yellow paper, it might struggle, because if it can't get the definition, if it can't photograph the definition of the pen, of the text, it will struggle a bit there. We have, if anyone does want the pen for a trial, what we do is when we send out the pen, we send this little booklet, which I've got here, which is the user guide. And besides the telling you how to hold the pen or whatever, and besides this menu guide, which is really useful, what it also has in here is, I'll just flip it over. It's got useful hints and tips, so it'll answer those sorts of questions, and common questions as well. And one interesting page in here as well is actually this page here, which talks about how audio promotes literacy. And we know that if you can see the word and hear the word together, it will improve comprehension by 76%, or it'll increases accuracy by 52%. So seeing the word and hearing the word is great. So not just, as I mentioned right at the start, not just for students that have dyslexia or reading difficulties, but also for those students who are learning English, or English is not their first language, because you can see the word, you can hear the word, and that then creates better comprehension and understanding. So we'll provide all these sorts of things for you. And as I said at the start as well, if you want to undertake a trial of the pen, there's no cost for that, and we'll get pens out to you straight away.
David, just asking, before you were saying that there was a possibility of an extended trial with some of the pens. What sort of length of time were you thinking of there? Well,
the normal trial period is 30 days, but we're just taking into account that if you've got a holiday, school holidays, we just double that. We give you 2 months. And that enables you to just use it with various students. It disappoints us sometimes when we, schools will trial the pen and, they'll send it back to us, which is absolutely fine. It's not a problem. And so we'll contact them and say, okay, no problems sending the pen back. So why it didn't work or whatever? And they said, oh, well, the student we tried it with, Bobby, it didn't really work well with him. And we'll say, okay, and did you try it with any other students? And they go, no. So we go, okay, fair enough. And of course, we'll take the pen back. It's not an issue or a problem. But so often a school that has trialed the pen, so they know how it works, and they've tried it with Bobby. Perhaps it didn't work with Bobby, but they didn't trial it with anyone else. Then a month or two later, there'll be someone else or other students, and they'll go, that ReaderPen, that would work really well here. So very often they'll ring up and they'll order some, or they'll ask for another trial. We don't mind, but I would suggest that you do. The reason we give you 30 days normally is really just so that you can use it with multiple students in over a class, over multiple classrooms or whatever. And the other thing too, if the school is sizable, we'd suggest we send more than one pen. And the reason for that is because sometimes if we just send one pen, they'll say, oh, okay, right, we'll use that with Johnny and we'll give it to, Mr. Smith and he can be in charge of it. If there's multiple pens, then the school will perhaps treat the trial a bit more seriously, and they'll say, oh, great, we'll give one to each of the teachers and see how it all goes. And then we get feedback. And so whilst they might get feedback, as I said before, that not every student will take to it, whilst they might get a feedback from someone that says, oh no, he didn't take to it, the feedback from the other teachers might be more positive. So, you know, we're happy to send multiple pens to schools that really want to evaluate it.
David, just another question. How do you find like the younger students, thinking of sort of prep students being able to handle it as a tool?
Look, it's interesting, and as I mentioned earlier on, you know, we've been going a couple of years here in Australia, and we've been going for sort of 10 years in the UK. And in the UK, believe it or not, they sell more exam readers and not as many reader pens. Here, we hardly sell that, you know, that many exam readers. That's the exam reader there, which we've subtly coloured bright orange, so invigilators know what it is. But so not only have we focused on reader pens, but we also have a tremendous number of primary schools that take the pen. And the reason for that is because, you know, getting them onto the pen at an early age is good. With regards to answering your questions, you have to be able to hold the pen. It's about the same size as a highlighter. And so they're saying ages 6 or 7 up. Of course, teachers then have to make the decision how much time, you know, if someone's been diagnosed with dyslexia, well, that's easy, you know, yes, they should have a pen because that's a, you know, an affliction which is not going to go away, and so you're providing assistive technology. But if it's someone that hasn't been diagnosed and you're not sure what, then you've got to make a decision as to how much time you want them to have with the pen, and because you don't want children to rely on it too much if in fact, you know, they're not dyslexic, or, you know, there's other issues or whatever. So I don't know if that's answered your question, but we would recommend years 6 or 7 up, ages, say 7 years and upwards should be okay with the pen. Younger, probably not so much. Okay.
Are there any more questions? Because we've gone quite over time. I think I'm going to have to set all these webinars for at least an hour. We seem to end up 40 minutes just doesn't seem enough. For
Oh, I thought it was an hour. Oh, there we go. I should have read the instructions. I should have scanned the instructions earlier.
Are there any more questions from anybody? Otherwise, we'll just wrap this up.
Yeah, no, I haven't got any more questions, Shay. But tomorrow we'll get together and we'll have a chat about the pen and how we can see it working with our kids. And then we'll get in touch with David. Yeah.
Yeah, please do. And if you need, you know, if you need names of schools or whatever that you know, are using the pen, if you want to make any calls, I can give you, you know, the
No, that's fine. I mean, we've known about them for quite a while, and as Liz said, she's been badgering me for quite a while about getting some to trial them. So I think we'll probably just contact you and get some to try out at school. Yeah.
That's the best thing. And then, you know, and then at the end of the day, as I said, if it's something you go, look, really, they're not as great as we thought they are, that's fine. Just shoot the pens back. We find, just for what it's worth, when we do trials, because, you know, we crunch all the numbers, about 80% of schools that we send the pens to keep them.
Okay. Yeah.
But, you know, again, it's completely up to you, and there's no cost apart from return postage, because your finance manager will go, your admin manager will go, what's happening? How come you've got these pens? What's the story?
She might.
I had one the other day. She goes, what's the story here? I've got, you know, confirmation of a pen, and she wanted to know who in the school had ordered it and whatever. And I had to calm her down and say, look, this is a trial. There's no cost. Yeah, but is there a time that if you don't buy it, you charge us? I went, no, we don't do that. So she was much calmer at the end of it. I said to the staff, I didn't want to argue with her. She was tough going.
No, I think Liz has probably got her way.
That's videoed, Vicky. So I now have video proof.
Trouble now. All right, so thank you.
I'm glad you could come and have a look, Liz, and finally all get together. So I'll finish up with everyone now. David's details are up on the screen. You can, if you want to buy pens individually, go through the Dear Dyslexic Foundation as well, or as David said, contact him.
Oh yes, if you want to buy them, go through Dear Dyslexic. If you want to trial them, come and talk to us, no problem.
So we'll send out the links to David's email address, and if you want to buy them through the website, where you can purchase them through our shop. And I would just like to say thank you all for coming tonight and for hanging in there till for an hour. And we really appreciate it. And we've hopefully it's been a useful evening. And if there's any further information you need, just let David or myself know. So thank you so much, David, for coming tonight. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks, David. Thanks,
Thank
Kate.
you very much.
Beck.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
See
you,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank you
Thanks, Liz.
all.
Bye
See ya.
now.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.